The Anthill Kids cult, led by Rock Tarot, remains one of the most haunting and disturbing cases in the chronicles of cult history. Operating in the remote wilderness of Ontario, Canada, the cult started as a commune luring individuals seeking spiritual enlightenment and a sense of belonging. But behind the veil of a utopian vision, Rock's charismatic leadership masked a dark reality of manipulation and abuse. But before we get started, welcome to True Crime with Maneater. If you love all things true crime, including missing person cases, cold cases, and just the strange happenings of the world, you know what to do. Let's get started. Roch Tarot was born on May 16, 1947, in Quebec, Canada. He grew up with a French-Canadian family in the Thetford mines. Although he was considered to be quite intelligent during his childhood, he left school in 7th grade and embarked on a self-taught journey through the Old Testament of the Bible. Roch soon developed a belief that the world was on the brink of its end, and he did anticipate a forthcoming battle between good and evil. Because of this, he would convert from Catholicism to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Roch seemed to embrace the idea of the holistic principles that promoted a healthy lifestyle, and this lifestyle was void of harmful substances like unhealthy foods, tobacco, and alcohol. Roch was a former lumberjack and a self-proclaimed prophet who claimed to have divine powers, and that's how he started the Anthill Kids cult. He presented himself as a prophet and convinced his followers that he had direct communication with God. Under this guise of creating a utopian society, he established strict rules and regulations and exerted complete control over his followers' lives. During the 1970s, Roch Tarot would successfully persuade a group of individuals to abandon their jobs and homes in order to join him in a religious movement. In 1977, he would establish the cult in Ste. Marie, Quebec, and his aim was of creating a communal setting where followers could freely listen to his, quote, motivational speeches, live in unity, equality, and strive to live without sin. The thing is, in order to maintain a sense of freedom within the cult, Roch would prohibit his members from having any sort of contact with their families or the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Soon, Roch's anxiety regarding the end of the world would intensify. He said that he received a divine warning that would occur in February of 1979. In order to prepare for this end of the world event, he would move his cult to a place along a mountainside known as the Eternal Mountain. Upon their arrival, the cult members were told to construct basically their own town, while Roch took on more of a relaxed role. At this point, he noticed that their collective efforts somewhat looked like ants diligently working in an anthill, and then this led to the name the Anthill Kids. But then, in February of 1979, when the apocalypse failed to happen, his followers began to question if Roch really was almighty and full of knowledge. But he would tell his followers that the time on earth and in God's world were not synchronized, and perhaps that's why a miscalculation had occurred. Roch wanted to expand his community, mostly to ensure devotion from its members. So Roch would enter into many relationships with the members of the cult. He would marry and impregnate 9 female members and would father over 20 children. So by the 1980s, the cult had grown to nearly 40 members. In 1984, Roch would relocate the group from Quebec to a new location near Burnt River, which was a small community in central Ontario. This move apparently marked a huge shift in the cult's journey. It did bring them to a place where eventually the cult's activity would be exposed. Shortly after, Roch's behavior seemed to take a disturbing turn. Roch did have a drinking problem, and it seemed to progressively worsen. As this drinking problem worsened, it seemed that he shifted from being a motivational leader to becoming increasingly irrational in his beliefs. And because of this, he became more like an authoritarian. He imposed strict rules on his members that forbidded them from speaking to each other in his absence and engaging in sexual activity without his permission. Here, I think, is a really interesting moment because he wouldn't even allow members of this group, of this cult, to speak to one another unless he was present. And make no mistake that was very calculated. He wanted to make sure that nobody was gonna, uprise and leave him. And if they were talking to one another and talking about his behavior and abuse, obviously that could lead to some sort of uprising. Although he was very abusive and quite frankly had erratic behavior, he somehow managed to maintain this charismatic facade. And it seems that none of the cult members openly questioned him or held him accountable for the mental, physical, and emotional harm he would inflict upon them. Soon, Rock would begin to impose punishments on those he deemed to be straying from his control. He would do things like spy on his followers and claim that God had revealed their transgressions to him. Members who decided to leave the cult were subject to physical abuse, such as being hit with belts or hammers, suspended from the ceiling, having their body hairs plucked individually, or Rock would even defecate on them. Typically, the Anthill Kids would generate income by selling baked goods, and the members who failed to bring in enough money would face punishment. I do want to note that viewer discretion is advised, and I hope you guys don't take this lightly. This video really is unlike most of the videos I do. The amount of violence that happened upon this cult was just incredibly intense and could be triggering to some viewers. So viewer discretion is advised. Eventually, punishments would escalate to extreme levels of violence within the cult. Members were forced to inflict harm upon themselves, like breaking their own legs with sledgehammers or sitting on lit stoves. They were also told to shoot each other in the shoulders or eat dead mice and feces. Then there were things like loyalty tests that would involve one member cutting off another member's toes with wire cutters. And the abuse wasn't just for the adults. It also extended to the children within the cult. Some children endured sexual abuse. They were held over fires, nailed to trees, while other children pelted them with stones. One of Rock's wives would leave a newborn child outside in freezing temperatures to die in an attempt to protect the infant from cruelty. Eventually, Rock really would want to regain focus on the original religious mission of the commune. And with this, he developed this belief in purifying his followers and ridding them of their sins through abusive purification sessions. Oftentimes, these sessions involved members being completely stripped naked while he would whip and beat them. As he claimed to possess divine powers, he began to perform unnecessary and amateur surgical procedures on sick members. And he did this to demonstrate his healing abilities. These so-called surgeries included injecting a 94% ethanol solution into stomachs and conducting circumcisions on both children and adults in the group. Although Rock continued to commit these despicable and heinous acts against people in the commune, he really faced no legal consequences for his abusive behavior. In 1987, social workers would remove 17 children from the cult, and yet nobody punished Rock. And then in 1989, when a follower named Salone complained of a stomach discomfort, Rock would take matters into his own hands. Without any sort of pain management, he would subject her to another crude surgery. He'd punch her in the stomach, insert a plastic tube into her rectum to perform an enema using molasses and olive oil. And then he would proceed to cut her open in her abdomen with a knife. He would tear out a portion of her intestines with his bare hands. Unfortunately, she would succumb to her injuries the following day. Again, I want to send a very strong warning that viewer discretion is advised because this next part is just unbelievable. It's deeply disturbing. Rock was so delusional by this point, he would claim to possess the power of resurrection. So he would drill a hole into this woman's skull, and then he would ejaculate into the cavity and attempt to bring her back to life. But when this disgusting ritual failed, they would bury her body not far from the Anthill Kids commune. Gabrielle Lavelle endured several mistreatments while at the Ontario commune in the late 1980s. She had welding torch burns inflicted on her genital area. She had a needle break off in her back and the forceful removal of 8 of her teeth. And then, in a fit of violence, Rock would cut off parts of her breasts and struck her head with the blunt side of an axe. Gabrielle did attempt to escape, and she would eventually flee the commune, but upon return, Rock would only subject her to further acts of brutality. He used wire cutters to remove one of her fingers, pinned her hand to a wooden table with a hunting knife, and then amputated her arm with a cleaver. But in 1989, Rock was arrested for the assault of Gabrielle. She did manage to flee the commune, and once again, she contacted the authorities. Authorities for a long time did believe and suspected that Rock had a cult due to the living conditions and the reports of abuse. But because the commune was officially registered as a church, apparently officials faced legal restrictions in investigating the adult members, so their focus shifted primarily on ensuring the welfare of the children. Rock was eventually convicted of assault for the amputation of Gabrielle's arm, and he received a 12-year prison sentence. That's just absolutely mind-boggling to me that this man amputated this poor woman's arm and all he got was a 12-year prison sentence. On top of everything else he had done to her, 12 years is quite light. After his arrest, the majority of the cult members would abandon him, but during his imprisonment, he fathered 4 more children with remaining female members during conjugal visits. But Gabrielle's testimony would open the door to further investigations. And then in 1993, Rock did plead guilty to second-degree murder for Salone's death, and finally, he was sentenced to life in prison. Of course, in typical Rock fashion, he did try to profit from his notoriety in 2009 by selling artwork on a true crime auction website. The Correctional Service of Canada did prevent his works from leaving the prison, and the incident did raise concerns about the killer benefiting from his prison activities. Rock did request parole in 2002, but he was denied due to the high risk of reoffending, and it appears that he never reapplied for parole. At the age of 63, on February 26, 2011, Rock Tarot was discovered deceased near his prison cell, and apparently it's believed that his death resulted from a confrontation with his cellmate, who was a 60-year-old convicted murderer. Matthew Gerald McDonald was charged with the killing and later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, which he received a life sentence for, but he was already serving a life sentence for a previous murder. It appears that there was an altercation between Matthew and Rock, and this would lead to Matthew stabbing Rock in the neck with a homemade weapon. Afterward, Matthew would walk to the guard station, surrender the weapon, and he would state, "That piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up." I had never heard about this cult, but upon reading it, it made my stomach turn. It's quite crazy that he had his members so manipulated and most likely terrified of not obeying him that he got them to do despicable things, like shoot each other and cut off toes and things along that nature. A lot of the time people do join cults because they want to be a part of something. They have this desire to belong. And cult members or cult leaders typically prey on people with few friends or family of their own. A lot of the times cults even look like a safe place for some people to leave whatever behind and go start a new life. Many people in cults have low self-esteem and they're just looking for self-confidence and love. And typically cult members or cult leaders tend to be really friendly and they compliment you and they make you feel good about yourself. And quite frankly, it gives people a purpose. If you're living on a commune and you have a job and you have friends and you have, this family supporting you, you have purpose in your life. And typically, cult leaders will take full advantage of that. Cults are typically marketed as organizations that promote self-betterment, whether that means obviously the promise of enlightenment or skills or helping you become, make your dreams come true or just become a better person. So people that are kind of on this mission to improve themselves, it's easy to be susceptible and fall into one of these cults. A lot of the times these cults break down to community where there's people around you. There's a place where you're welcomed and loved and considered. And a lot of people don't have that in general. Of course, I'm not a psychiatrist, so these are just things I've read about. And I don't want people to judge members. Of course, people join for different reasons. Rock appears to have started a cult because he liked control. He liked to inflict abuse. He was a terrible person. But the people that joined may have just been lost. They may have been looking for something that was missing in their life. Maybe they just needed a safe place to go, and unfortunately, Rock got a hold of them. So of course, people join for different reasons, and it's not really up for us to judge, but if somebody was trying to force me to sledgehammer my bones or hurt somebody else, I don't think I would ever be able to do something like that. But I'd love to know your thoughts on this case. Why did his followers stay? Were they afraid, or were they just that deeply loyal to Rock Tarot? That's it for today, guys. If you like this video or any other video on my channel, be sure to subscribe and turn on alerts so you never miss a video upload. I'll be back next week with a new video, and I'll see you then.